Welcome to the most unhinged thing I've ever done. In this series, I'm going to be covering every single Pokemon that exists, and I'm going to be saying just a completely out of hand, in-depth, useless shower thought and or realization about every single one. And instead of scripting this out the simple way, like just typing it out all on a doc, I've been writing this all by hand in a massive notebook. So if anyone ever discovers this, maybe it'll be the last sign that humanity ever existed. They're gonna think we were all insane. Anyway, I don't know how many I'll be able to cover in each video. All I know is that this is gonna take a lot of videos because there's a lot, and these range from just simple little realizations to really in-depth and crazy things. So, yeah. But to get into it, we obviously start with Kanto, and I don't know if I'll be able to get through Kanto in this video, but I'll try, but I probably won't. Obviously, we start with Bulbasaur. Now, Bulbasaur, really, it shouldn't be part Poison type, because first of all, virtually no base stage starters have two types. The only other one is Rowlet, but for Rowlet, it at least makes sense, since it's a bird, so it has flying type. But Bulbasaur, the dex doesn't mention anything that would actually imply it would be a Poison type. And in addition to that, its design doesn't really imply it either, because at least its evolutions do. Ivysaur has Ivy in its name, which you could relate to poison, and then Venusaur has a Rafflesia flower on its back, which could also be related to poison, but then Bulbasaur just has nothing going for it. Ivysaur, its dex entries in red and blue, says it can't stand on its hind legs once its bulb grows, but considering its bulb has technically already grown from when it evolved, you'd think it wouldn't be able to stand on its hind legs at all. But the reason I'm noting this is because the only sprites in history where Ivysaur stands on its hind legs are in red and blue. The same games that mention that. As for Venusaur, no attributes of a Venus flytrap really exist on it. Instead, it looks more like a Rafflesia flower. I mean, if anything, Carnivine is a Venus flytrap, not Venusaur. Another thing about it, though, is that the dex doesn't really mention anything that would support it being a poison type, which is also something I said for Bulbasaur, but at least it has that flower on its back, which, in real life, assuming that's supposed to be a Rafflesia, those are known to smell really bad. So that could be related to the poison type, but there's literally nothing I came across in dex entries that would support why it's a poison type. Anyway, Charmander, it's based on a mythical fire salamander, so in a sense, its name is quote-unquote the strongest sounding of its line, because Charizard, that sounds cool and everything, but that literally just comes from lizard, and Charmeleon just comes from chameleon, but Charmander comes from salamander. And again, there is a mythical creature called a salamander. It's like a fire dragon thing. So in a sense, that's a lot more powerful than just a regular lizard and chameleon. So in a sense, Charizard should be Charmander. Anyway, Charmeleon, its party hat form in Pokemon Go doesn't wear the hat on its horn. Instead, it just wears it on its forehead, even though the hat is just about the same size as its horn. So it would be a perfect fit. So he needs to get his act together and put it on his horn instead. Anyway, Charizard, some old dex entries mention that its fire will turn blue if it gets angry, and it's very likely that this partially inspired Mega Charizard X, who has blue fire. Squirtle, now this is a weird one. This goes for its whole line. I'm going to be making references to Mario here, because its whole line can be related to Mario here. As for Squirtle, if you take its shiny form, its shell being green resembles a Koopa Troopa. And as for Wartortle, its shiny shell is also green, but since it has the wings on its head, it now resembles a Paratroopa. And then lastly for Blastoise, this doesn't really tie into the Koopas. Actually it does, because its Japanese name is Kamex, which is one letter away from Kamek, that dude from Mario. Boom. Squirtle line equals Mario. Anyway, Caterpie, some dex entry says it becomes a silk cocoon which as far as I know, that's certainly not what Metapod is, since it's a chrysalis and it's a hard shell, not a silk cocoon. Anyway, Metapod itself, there is a chance that it may actually be able to de-evolve. We know that Slowbro and some others can, but Metapod may be able to as well, because some dex entries say it can come out of its quote-unquote shell if it breaks, and that would probably imply that Caterpie comes back out. And if it's not saying that, then it's just saying it's gonna prematurely evolve into Butterfree when it comes out of its shell. But that's certainly implying something. Anyway, Butterfree, its regular eye color is similar to that of shiny Metapod's body color, and its shiny eye colors are similar to normal Metapod's body color. Then for Weedle, the dex never mentions the stinger on its tail being poisonous. It only mentions the one on its head being poisonous, so for all we know, the one on its tail might just be for show, and it might not even be a stinger. Kakuna, normal Kakuna and shiny Metapod have a similar color, while shiny Kakuna and normal Metapod have a similar color. Beedrill. So in reality, it doesn't really have drills, because the dex uses the words stingers and needles in all of the dex entries that mention it, and also its Japanese name is Spear, and none of these are drills. Moving into Pidgey, it has an electric-type Delta species card, which was likely inspired by the fact that it has a yellow shiny, at least I would assume. Pidgeotto. In the set Secret Wonders, its artwork is its official art. However, Pidgey and Pidgeot have unique arts that are not their official art in that set. Pidgeot. The deck says it can travel at Mach 2 speeds, but to move at Mach 2 speeds would mean you're breaking the sound barrier, meaning you would literally cause a sonic boom. However, Pidgeot cannot learn sonic boom, so the dex is lying. Then for Rattata, the deck says its incisors can get too long, and it will starve because it won't be able to eat anything anymore. So maybe Raticate's teeth touch each other for that reason, because Rattatas, they just simply grow down, but Raticates, they seem to meet each other, so perhaps that's to stop them from overgrowing. That, or it's just an accident that it happened to be like that and it wasn't an intentional design. I don't know. Anyway, Raticate itself, the deck says it stands on its hind legs when attacked, but it stands on all fours in a lot of battle sprites, where it's, literally getting attacked. Spearow, its dex number is 21. It's found on routes 22 and 23 in Kanto, though, not 21. Not that that means anything, but that's kind of the point of this. Fearow, it's sort of the inverse of Beedrill in a way, at least if you account for its whole evolution line. Fearow's, that is, because Spearow has spear in its English name, and Fearow's Japanese name has drill in it, but Beedrill's the opposite. It has drill in its English name, and its Japanese name is literally just the word spear. Ekans, its Japanese name is Arbo, which would make it seem like Arbok's Japanese name would be Ekin or something, or Cans, but that is not the case. Arbok, it says its patterns differ by region, but it has different patterns in almost every Kanto region sprite. So that's literally the same region, so why is it different patterns? Anyway, Pikachu. You'd think I would have came up with something better, but unfortunately I honestly couldn't. However, what I did come up with was the fact that even if Pikachu hadn't been made the mascot, it still would have made sense to use him as the representative for the 25th anniversary of Pokemon, which they obviously did because he is the mascot. And the only reason that is because he is Dex number 25, so 25. Raichu. Since it didn't get a G-Max, and Pikachu didn't get a regional form because they seem to just love Pikachu so much more than Raichu, obviously, there's a chance they might not give it a Mega or any new form in upcoming games like ZA, but they might give Pikachu a Mega because of that. Sandshrew. Its Ruby Dex entry says it absorbs water efficiently. However, its Soul Silver Dex entry says it hates water, so that's kind of paradoxical in a way. Sandslash, it learned Sand Tomb, followed by Slash in its Learn set, which are words that start with sand, and slash, its literal name. Nidoran female. The red and blue dex entries for it mentions its horn, though the sprite in those games doesn't even have a visible horn. Nidorina is the only Nido to not have a horn. And Nidoqueen, every main dex entry mentions its scales that it apparently has, though official art and official sprites literally never show it having scales, and as far as I know, rhinoceroses, which it's clearly partially based on, do not have scales. As for the male Nidoran, in the set Rising Rivals, its card looks like a sort of reboot of the base set card because it has the same attack, an updated official art, and a similar blurry background to the original base set one. Nidorino, it's the only Nido to refer to the rhino name of origin, which may or may not be intentional. And by that I mean it's the only one that has anything close to rhino in its name, being Reno. Nidoking, the dex refers to its hide as being rock-like, and it also refers to it as being steel-like, which would imply that it would be either a poison rock type or a poison steel type, but instead it's a poison ground type. Clefairy. Before Gen 6, dex entries often mentioned the word Moonlight, which later became a fairy type move, and Clefairy later became a fairy type. Also, its beta name was Area, and Sparkling Area later became a fairy type move as well, and obviously Clefairy became a fairy type. Clefable. It can learn various noise-based moves despite the fact that the deck says it prefers to live in quiet places because of its very sensitive ears. Vulpix. Old dex entries say its tail is white at birth, which may have been reflected in Alolan Vulpix being pure white. Ninetales. It can learn many psychic-type attacks and it's described as having magic powers, but it's not a psychic type. Jigglypuff. Its rollout animation in games shows a rocky ball, like anyone using rollout, because that's how rollout works. It shows a ball of rock rolling. However, in Smash Bros., it's just Jigglypuff rolling. There is no rock included. Wigglytuff. It can inflate like a balloon, but it can't learn growth, even though it can literally inflate like a balloon. However, it can learn other grass moves, so it's not like that's the reason it can't learn growth. Zubat. The dex says it is damaged by sunlight, like a vampire would be, but it is just fine in harsh sunlight in battle. It's not nerfed because it's not water, like a regular water type would be in harsh sunlight, so in reality, it doesn't seem to be damaged by sunlight at all, because it just goes under the same effects as anyone else in harsh sunlight. Golbat. The dex says it drains victims when it attacks until it can't fly anymore, but no matter how much it attacks, even using draining moves, it will still have ground immunity, because using an attack like Roost, they'll land, and if a bird or a flying type lands, it doesn't have its ground immunity anymore. So the dex implies that eventually Golbat will land because it's too heavy from drinking too much blood or something, which means it wouldn't have a ground immunity anymore, but that doesn't happen in battle because I guess they don't account for that, and I guess that would kind of suck if they did because that would just be really bad for Golbat. Anyway, Oddish, its sprite from Pokemon Yellow represents the modern shiny it has now, specifically the modern one because its original shiny was also different. Gloom, it can learn Sweet Scent despite being described as smelling really bad. Vileplume, old dex entries say it has the largest petals in the world. However, I measured official artwork. I whipped out Safari, I looked them up, I took a ruler and literally measured my screen. I took the measurements of Venusaur's petals and Vileplume's petals, and I did some calculations to determine how big they are in comparison to the official height that the dex lists. And in the end, I found that both its petals and Venusaur's petals seemed to be about 2 feet, but Venusaur's were slightly bigger. So even though Venusaur existed at the same time as Vileplume and literally in the same gen, Vileplume is lying. And even if I did my measurements wrong, when you consider Mega Venusaur later went on to exist, its petals are definitely bigger because it's even bigger than Venusaur. Anyway, Paras. Breeding Paras honestly seems kind of unethical since they are born with parasitic fungus on their back that drains their life energy, so stop breeding Paras and stop torturing them. Parasect. It can have dry skin and damp as abilities, which are quite literally the opposite. It's got wet skin, but also dry skin. Venonat. Its Gym Heroes artwork shows it shooting eye lasers, which predates Fire Red and Leaf Green, at least for the English entry, which explains that it can do that. That's the first English entry that says it can do that in the Pokédex. However, Japanese Red, that dex entry, also mentioned that, so assuming it was never shown in the anime pre-Fire Red and Leaf Green, the Gym Heroes card was the first example in English of it being able to do this, and then wasn't seen again until Fire Red and Leaf Green. Venomoth. Its name draws from the blue morpho butterflies, but only its shiny is blue. Diglett. Like Zubat, it also is sensitive to sunlight, but also is not harmed by it in battle. In fact, it benefits because water is its weakness, and since water is weakened to sunlight, it's just going to benefit from being in sunlight, not hurt by it. Dugtrio. The dex says it digs with headbutts, but it can't learn headbutt. Meowth. Alolan Meowth and Persian are the only of 3 pure normal type lines that became dark type regional forms that did not also keep the normal type, the others being Rattata line and Zigzagoon line. Persian. It seems to lose all money or greed association that Meowth had when it evolves. Like, literally, if you read through the decks. Psyduck. The Blockade and Sinnoh can't be battled or caught, but the dex never says this is the case when they have headaches. Also, you can't jump over them or walk around them even though it would be realistically possible to do so. It's just the game being obnoxious. Golduck. Its dex entry in blue says people often mistake it for a Kappa, which predates Ludicolo, an actual Pokemon based on a Kappa. And the funny thing about this is that Kappas are turtles, not birds. However, they designed Ludicolo to look sort of like a bird, so this may have been inspired by the fact that Golduck was mentioned to be mistaken for a Kappa since Golduck is literally a bird. And since Ludicolo went on to be the Kappa of the Pokemon world, they might have designed it to look like a bird because of that. Mankey. In Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Mankey itself says, "They call me the offspring of a fighting spirit," which makes sense now that Annihilape exists because it is literally a fighting spirit. As for Primeape, exclusive to Red, while Persian was exclusive to Blue, they both got Delta cards in Holland Phantoms, where Primeape was a fire type, meaning that the card was red, because that's what fire type cards are, and Persian was dark, but the symbol was blue for some reason. This may have been intentional. Growlithe. The Noble Arcanine evolved from a Growlithe without a Firestone in Legends Arceus, despite needing it to evolve. Arcanine. Some entries say it is from China. As for the Cantonian Arcanine I'm referring to, but Kanto is based on Japan, not China. Poliwag. The dex says the direction of its spiral differs by area, but it is always in the same direction in every single generation and region and sprite. Poliwhirl. 2 of the 20 unique Poliwhirl cards that exist right now depict it with fingers instead of mittens. Poliwrath. The spiral on its red and green sprite is inconsistent. It's not really a spiral, it's just kind of a jumbled mess. Abra. Even though it can sense danger, it only teleports away in Let's Go Games Overworld if you approach it from the front. Kadabra. Uri Geller, that whole controversy, it only targeted Kadabra for some reason and not Alakazam, even though Alakazam also uses spoons. Alakazam. Its Japanese name is Fudin, and if you split that into 2 words, you get food in, which likely wasn't intentional because That's the Japanese name, not in the English name. But in English, food in, you could relate that to the fact that it has spoons, so it puts food in its mouth with the spoons. I'm gonna throw a little hi-hat clap in there for that hilarious joke. Anyway, Machamp. It has chop in its name, even though in its official artwork it is punching. Machamp, however, is chopping. Machoke. Some early sprites are green, which later became its shiny color. Machamp. The deck says its arms get tangled when trying to do anything that takes care, so this is perhaps why Machokes are used for moving, as opposed to Machamps, because they do not have forearms, so they won't apparently get their arms tangled, because moving into a new home takes care. Also, there's a V-alt art in the Sword and Shield era of Machamp dropping a bunch of plates, or at least it seems to be dropping them. This might also be reference to that. Bellsprout. The mouth of its Pokemon Pinball sprite resembles Zero from Kirby Dream Land 3, specifically the eyeball form. Weepinbell likely excludes G from its name because of the character limit. Victorybell. It uses a leaf stone to evolve from Weepinbell, which it has one more leaf than, so perhaps the leaf stone gave it that extra leaf. Tentacool. The deck says it dries up out of water, but in any battle, even in battles on water, it doesn't even sit in the water. It floats above the water, so they're always out of water, which means they're always drying up. Tentacruel. The deck says it has 80 tentacles, but the most a card has ever shown is 22, so we've never seen it with 80 tentacles, and that card comes from Gym Heroes, by the way. Geodude. Its artwork in the Legend Maker set, and the Arceus set, and the 151 set are all kind of similar because they all depict it grabbing onto 2 rocks with each of its hands. Graveler. It apparently eats 1 ton of rocks a day, so based on its weight, it could eat 8.6 other Gravelers in a day if it wanted to. Golem. It can have the rock head ability, even though its head is one of the only parts of its body that isn't a rock, because in fact its body is the rock. Ponyta. A shiny Ponyta is given in Legends Arceus. There happens to be a shiny Ponyta card in the Arceus TCG set, so this may have been intentional. Rapidash. The shiny had purple fire at first, but then it became gray for many games, but it seems to be purple again, especially in Arceus, so I'm not sure what that's all about. Slowpoke. Its Galarian form loses the water type despite living on beaches and still exhibiting an aquatic lifestyle. Slowbro. Its old dex entries for Cantonian Slowbro, they say the Shelter injects poison into it. However, this is opposite to what Galarian Slowbro became, where the dex describes as it having poison sucked from it by the Shelter. Magnemite. In both Pokemon Pinball games, its 2 sprites are completely different in color, despite being the same game. Magneton. The deck says it emits a force that damages mechanical devices, but it pretty much is a mechanical device, so is it dying just by existing? Farfetch'd. The Pokemon Stadium dex says its plant is unidentified, but other entries say what it is, because it's literally a leak. Doduo. Its shiny being green may be inspired by the kiwi fruit, which is green, since even though it's mostly based on a dodo, it's also kind of based on a kiwi. Dodrio. Doduo's category name is the twin bird Pokemon, which would imply that Dodrio is the triplet bird Pokemon, but instead it's the triple bird Pokemon. Seal. Its name would be better if spelled correctly as opposed to S-E-E-L, because if it was spelled just like the word seal is, then it would still have the word sea within it, which would imply it's pure water typing. Dugong. Its original name, Manatee, was also misspelling of a very similar animal, but now it's a misspelling of Dugong. Grimer. It and its shiny are pretty similar to Creeper and its variant Primordial Goo from Luigi's Mansion. Muck. The red and blue dex entries imply that there is a true body living under the sludge, saying it has footprints and is only covered in sludge. Shelter. has the "dur" sound in its name, like the "dur" burger from Fortnite, which also has a tongue sticking out. Cloyster. The inner orb resembles Gastly, which is the very next Pokemon in the dex. And as for Gastly itself, old dex entries mention the Indian elephant. Raichu also has an old dex entry that mentions an Indian elephant. But for Raichu, that was replaced with Kaparaja in the Arceus dex, but not for Gastly. Haunter. It's probably the reason Lick is a ghost-type move, because of its tongue. Gengar. Now, what I wrote down here actually mentions something I forgot to mention earlier, and that's that when you trade Golem and Machamp, it actually makes sense that you would have to trade them, because Graveler has 4 arms and Machoke has 2, but then when you trade them, the evolutions are inverse. Machamp has 4 arms, Golem has 2. So what I mentioned here is that Gengar is kind of similar to that. Referring to Gengar and Alakazam, that is. Haunter floats and evolves into Gengar, who stands. Kadabra doesn't float, but evolves into Alakazam, which does, at least in some official artworks and stuff. Onyx. It got a GX card in Hidden Fates, even though Steelix existed at the time, and usually ultra rare cards are reserved for fully evolved Pokemon, so I'm not sure why they did that. Drowsy. The deck says it gets sick from eating bad dreams, and it also says it prefers to eat children's dreams, which is a contradiction because children more often have nightmares. Hypno. The only right-handed sprite of it is in red and green. Krabby. It's called the river crab Pokemon, despite being said to live on beaches. Kingler. In Pokemon Gold, the deck says it can barely lift its bigger pincer despite holding it higher than its other pincer in official art. Voltorb. Red, blue, and green sprites actually resemble a GS ball. Electrode. Red, blue, and green sprites had no teeth, but every sprite afterwards does. Execute. Its original shiny may have been inspired by the green eggs and ham trope, but its new shiny was likely inspired by the idea of like a golden egg or the golden goose egg. Exeggutor. Its footprint resembles the TCG dark symbol. Cubone. It's born with its mother's skull already on it, which doesn't make sense because it should imply that an Alolan Cubone would exist to wear an Alolan Marowak skull, which is different from the Kanto one, but it's still just a regular Kanto Cubone. Marowak. Marowak's ghost looks more like Haunter, at least in Let's Go. Hitmonlee. Only one TCG art depicts it not attacking with its legs, and that is Expedition. Hitmonchan. It has 3 ultra rare cards, while the other Hitmons as of now have none. Lickitung. If you remove the letters of its classification, the licking Pokemon, you get 2. Sorry, I phrased that weirdly. If you remove the letters of its classification name that it shares with its actual name, you are left with just TU, which, you pronounce that as 2, and in Gen 2, rollout is TM4. Now going off the number 4, in Generation 4, Lickitung got an evolution that evolves by learning rollout. Very in-depth. That's probably the best one yet. I was pretty proud of that one. Coughing. Not only is the red and blue sprite for it the only one with the skull above its face, it's also the only one where the skull symbol has defined eyes. Gotta flip the page here. Wheezing. It and Coughing are both missing an H in their name from words they are named after, though Wheezing's is omitted while Coughing's is replaced. Rhyhorn. It's called Rhyhorn even though Rhydon has a more prominent horn than it does. Rhydon. It's called Rhydon even though you ride on Rhyhorn. Chansey. It has 8 unique TCG cards with attacks including the word double. And these attacks include Double Edge, Double Slap, and Double Tackle. Tangela. Every move in its learn set that isn't Grass or Normal is learned consecutively, being Poison Power, Ancient Power, Knockoff. Kangaskhan. It's born with the baby already there, at least if you like hatch it out of an egg or something. So that implies that the baby is simultaneously its child and also its sibling, which doesn't make any sense. Horsey, removing the vowels from its Japanese name leaves behind 3 T's. Among its entire moveset of every attack it can possibly learn in Pokemon media, it can learn 3 attacks that start with the letter T, like the 3 T's in its Japanese name. The first is Terra Blast by TM, Twister by Level Up. When I found these, I couldn't find a third one at first, and I was getting annoyed because it almost worked out so perfectly. But then I realized there is a single card in the TCG where Horsey can learn, or not even learn, but use Tackle. So there it has 3 attacks that start with T for the 3 T's in its Japanese name. Anyway, Seadra. It has a completely unique typing from Dragolge, even though they're based on the same animal. A pure water type and a dragon poison type. Goldeen. It's used in Smash as a sort of useless fish Pokemon, even though Magikarp is the much more popular representative of that. Seaking. The deck says females are less vividly colored, which may imply shinies are more likely to be female, since the shiny is less vividly colored. Alright, I think this video is like 30 minutes long now, so gonna have to stop it here. If I'm really feeling it, maybe I'll make some of the later ones like an hour long, which would just be crazy, but since this is the first one, I don't want to make it the longest one. Unfortunately, didn't get through Kanto, but there's still like 2 pages of writing to get through, so I'm not even going to try right now. If you liked this, consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and all that stuff. This series, it's taking a while to write all this stuff, so it's honestly kind of good that I'm going to be splitting these videos up into even smaller, because I'm only written up to Gen 3, so I've got to keep going with that. Anyway, for now, thanks for watching.